and welcome back to Spinal Cast. I'm your host, David Stevens, and joining us today is someone many of you are familiar with. It takes no introduction. However, he is the executive director for the Morton Cure Paralysis Fund, Spinal Cast's own Peter Morton. Peter, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me. It's kind of funny to be on the podcast as a guest instead of from a different point of view. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, totally. I was actually going to mention the same thing. You know, we've had you on before as a co-host, but today you're a guest, and we're going to kind of focus around you, your story, and really where you've taken MCPF and things like that. So without further ado, I'm sure a lot of our audience may have heard your injury story before in some of our other publications, but for those of our audience that haven't heard it, would you be willing to kind of do a quick review of your injury story, kind of what happened and how it all went down?
Sure, happy to. So this was August of 1995. Yeah, my brother and I were trying to figure out what we wanted to do that day. We came up with the idea of going for a mountain bike ride. So we went out on the trail. We probably weren't much more than maybe a mile in. I'm not really sure, but it looks like my front tire must have slid out based on the tracks that we saw in the mud. And I went over the handlebars and hit the ground and broke my neck. I knew right away what I had done, and I couldn't move nor breathe.
Wow.
My brother came rushing back, and I mouthed to him that I couldn't breathe. And I was face down, so he couldn't figure out, he knew he wasn't supposed to turn me with a spinal cord injury, but he couldn't do anything like mouth to mouth either because I was face down. So pretty soon he told me that I turned first a little blue, and then when he saw me turn gray, he knew that it was an hour never. So
wow,
being the good engineer that he came up with the idea of sliding a hand under my chest, putting the other hand on my back, and squeezing like an accordion. So when he pushed the air out and then released, some air came back in, and that actually brought me back. I had passed out by that time, and that brought me back. The lights came back on, and then for about the next maybe 45 minutes, he was breathing for me that way as we sent someone down to the trailhead to get some help.
Wow. Talk about exhausting. I can't even imagine. I mean, that's an incredible amount of work that he had to put in to just keep you alive.
It really was. And I could see it because for him to be the most efficient that he could be, put his face about 6 inches from my face.
Wow.
So I could see the sweat pouring off of him. There was one point where he was so exhausted there was another biker that came along the road, and he asked him to take over for a while. But he wasn't as good at it. And so very quickly I was short of breath again, and I asked for Patrick, my brother, to take over again, and he felt a lot better. Eventually we had some police got there. We were right by the Minnesota River, and so some police got there with oxygen bottles. I went through all those, but eventually I heard a helicopter landing, I would guess maybe 100 yards away or so, and they backboarded me and took me to the helicopter, and I don't remember a whole lot after that until ICU.
It sounds like a pretty terrifying experience for a pair of brothers who were just going to go out on a nice bike ride, but it's also an incredible story of endurance and commitment by your brother in keeping you alive. And so during the story, you mentioned you kind of knew immediately after flying over the handlebars, you knew that you had broken your back. And in some of our previous episodes, we've interviewed other people with injuries who they knew something really bad had happened, but they couldn't pinpoint it. Did you have some sort of previous knowledge of spinal cord injuries before it happened? Or how were you able to kind of be like, I know it's my back or my spine that's injured?
Yeah, strange. It's a good question. Strangely, Christopher Reeve had been injured that summer in May. And I remember thinking about his situation and what all that would entail, and I thought, oh my God, how awful that would be. And then 3 months later, suddenly I'm in the same position as he is, or he was at the time. I actually thought to myself, I can remember one time I was coming out of the gym and I had a bottle of Gatorade in my hand, and I saw those, what do they call those? The gossip magazines by the checkout.
Oh, okay.
And I saw a picture of Christopher Reeve there with all sorts of tubes coming out of his mouth and such, and the headline on the magazine said, "I want to die."
Wow.
And I looked at that, and I was sort of like, yeah, I get it. I wouldn't want to live either. And then all of a sudden, boom, there I am.
Yeah.
In that situation. So I think it was Christopher Reeve's injury that really made me realize right away what it was.
Well, that kind of, talking about seeing that picture of him in that headline, and even mentioning to yourself, yeah, I wouldn't want to live that way either. That kind of ties into the whole mental side of post-injury. So once you were injured and in a hospital, and starting your recovery, I can't imagine that was a particularly easy time for you. And I guess, is there anything you could say about how you turned that corner and how dark did it get?
It got pretty dark in the sense that, well, there's a couple aspects. First of all, there's the physical one. When you're first hurt like that, your body doesn't really know how to exist in that state, so you have all sorts of trouble. I had lung infections pretty bad. For the first week, I couldn't talk or move at all other than blink. So my body, I was actually nauseated a lot because I had worked out so much before that, and that apparently my bones were quite dense. And as soon as you just cold turkey stop using your bones, all the calcium from my bones was leaking into my blood and essentially poisoning me from the inside.
Wow.
So I was nauseated all the time. I couldn't sit up for more than a few seconds before I had to sit back. So there was the physical battle that was just, day to day of trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the mental side too. And the hardest part of that was, from what I could see at that moment, everything had been taken away that I love to do.
Right.
So it was really difficult to imagine how could I ever be happy again. Literally, there's nothing that I used to enjoy that I could do anymore. So the hardest, to use your word, the darkest part was trying to figure out what that future would look like and how could I ever be happy in that state.
Totally.
But what there was a gentleman who came to see me in the ICU, and he was a cop who was shot in the line of duty and paralyzed. And he talked to me and said that, it doesn't seem like it now, but there's a future there where you can be happy, so hang in there. Each day will get a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that took a long time, but eventually it turned out that he was right. And so, basically to get through that, it's just a matter of battling every day to, just keep going one more day, one more day, and eventually, slowly but surely, things began to turn around.
Well, I mean, I personally have been around MCPF for my entire life, and I know, I've gotten to know your family, your extended family, your parents, your wife, your kids, many of your former coworkers before the injury, and I think everyone was in support of you, and obviously wanted you to keep fighting and live on, and find a positives out of it. But I really think what it boils down to is this internal battle that you had to have with yourself, and is this really fulfilling to me? It's fulfilling to other people for me to be laying here, but for me, it's just not doing it. And so I think that's that triggering point, is whenever you can flip the switch inside yourself versus having all the support around you who are being positive and wishful. For you to do that to yourself, I think is really difficult. And so, outside of that discussion with the police officer, was there any other specific moment you remember where you were like, I'm flipping the switch now, like I'm done pouting?
Well, you hit it on the head, because I just had amazing friends and family, and still do. My friends and my family were so supportive of me since the very beginning. They never had a doubt about, that I still had some things to live for and to bring to
society,
to bring to others, and society. And so that's really what made the difference over time, is just that unwavering support of friends and family. It's kind of funny, David, that I think as we're going through life and things are good and everything, we almost don't even think about, at least when you're younger, you don't think about the value of friends and family. It's something that's always there, and you kind of take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, boom, in a situation like that, you really find out who your friends are. You really find out how supportive and caring they all are, and family as well. And they were and still are the difference in terms of having a positive outlook on life and being happy on a day-to-day basis.
Well, and just clarification for myself, I don't ever actually think I've been able to ask you this question, but when you were facing those dark times and kind of getting yourself through it, you had the option to say, like, that's it, right? Or were you not in a position that you could call it quits? Were you kind of, in a place where they were like, no, we're keeping you like this until you change? Or were you able to kind of call the shots?
That's a great question. And it's even amazing to me. There's a amazing story I'll tell you about that. So I was sitting in a cafeteria in college with my best friend there, and he told me about a movie that he just saw with Richard Dreyfuss where he was paralyzed and they kept him in a hospital, and he wanted to die, but the hospital wouldn't let him. Now, I've never seen this movie still to this day, but so my friend and I began to talk about spinal cord injury, how dreadful his situation must have been, and we agreed. Believe it or not, I said to him, I could probably handle being a paraplegic, but I could never handle being a quadriplegic.
Yeah.
And he said the same thing, and we basically made a pact that day that if that ever happened to either of us, we'd call the other one, and the other one would be willing to come in and take us out. I kid you not, we had that conversation.
Unbelievable.
And so after I got hurt, my friend was quite rightly terrified that I was going to call him and ask him that.
Yeah.
But what I asked him to do was, could you go to a lawyer and find out what rights do I have here?
Yeah.
Can I control my own destiny or can I not? And his message to me was that I could, because I could essentially refuse medical care.
Okay.
And David, that day was, when I got that answer, that was one of the most freeing days in the whole journey. The fact that I had a choice.
Yeah.
The fact that I could, when I got up every day after that, I knew I was getting up because I wanted to and not because I had to.
Right.
And so that, in a situation where you lose a lot of independence, that was the ultimate independence that I had. And really from that day forward, I was able to, it was still hard a lot of the time,
Mm-hmm.
but I knew that I was making the ultimate decision to keep going.
Well,
And that was very freeing to me.
I love that kind of like re-understanding of life itself. I think all of us take every day for granted. The sun comes up, I get up, and I'm going to do what I do and kind of move on. But in an injury like this, all control is taken away. You can't do anything yourself ever again. Mm-hmm. And it's, I'm sure, just kind of just an elacious feeling when you get told, like, yeah, I mean, this is you control that. So I like that. I like that story. That was really interesting. Let's kind of, shift gears, get a little bit more away from the doom and gloom of it all. And I want to talk about your wonderful wife, Krista, who I've had a great, relationship with over the years. Actually, for the viewers at home, as an infant, I actually attended Peter's wedding when he married Krista. So the way I understand it, you guys were dating before the injury and stayed together after the injury. How did the injury kind of affect the relationship? And was there points in time in which you thought she would be leaving? How did that dynamic kind of work and develop over time?
Sure. So we had been dating about 5 years at that time, which was really, that was a time in my life where I felt like the luckiest person around. I felt like, I loved my job. They paid me well. I had a great looking girlfriend and could do pretty much play all the sports that I wanted and so forth. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything was just going great. And then all of a sudden, bang, that happens. And I remember I talked to her in the intensive care unit. And I said, Krista, if you want to leave, that's okay. Nobody comes into a relationship expecting to have to deal with this. But I said, if you want to stay, then we basically start over today. We take it one day at a time. I don't know if I can handle this, so I don't expect that you would either.
Right.
And she never wavered. She was 100% committed that she wanted to be in the relationship, regardless of the physical situation that I was in. And since that day, she has just been unbelievable in terms of her commitment and her support of me along the way. She's one of the most amazing people I know. Now, one of the things we discovered, of course, is how strong our relationship was. We got married 5 years after the accident. If your relationship can survive that, you can survive anything.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't recommend people do that to find out whether their relationship is strong or not, but it certainly did that with us.
That's such a great story, and I'm, I've had the opportunity of knowing both of you for so long, and it's seen, I think, by everybody who surrounds you too. Just the passion that you have for one another and the commitment, and through thick and thin. And so that's really a positive experience. So post marriage, and I'm assuming some of our audience may know that you have 2 children. But for those of you who don't, Peter does have 2 children, a son and a daughter. And those children were born post-injury. And I think, for me at least, I have no understanding of how that is possible.
Sure.
And, I don't want to get too private, but
Sure.
I would be very interested to hear a little bit more about what process you had to go through to have children post-injury.
Sure. It's called in vitro fertilization, where essentially they combine the sperm and the egg in a petri dish. And then once it's beginning to germinate, then they implant the embryo in the mother. And most of the time, that actually works. Sometimes it doesn't, but we were very fortunate that we had a lovely daughter and son via that method. To be honest, we went to the doctor the first time to ask whether that was possible or not. And I was just sort of assuming that it wasn't. So when we began to talk to him, he said, yeah, I've had, I think he said he had 8 clients in that situation, and 6 of them had gotten pregnant. So, well, wow, I guess it is possible. And that's been a tremendous part of my life since then.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I think, at least for me, I had definitely heard of in vitro before. I guess my personal question is, how do you harvest the sperm? How does that even happen?
That's a great question. They actually have a method where they stimulate the prostate, which causes spontaneous ejaculation. So that's how they do that. It's kind of crazy, but it works.
And even without feeling, it works.
Yeah, I mean, they might as well been working on someone else, because I can't feel anything below my neck.
Right.
So when they were doing that, I mean, I had no involvement in that whatsoever.
That's interesting to me that the body has those natural things that will take place even without feeling being associated with it.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing. I was fully awake the whole time. They didn't put me out or anything, but as I said, they might as well have been working on someone else, because I had no sensation from that.
Interesting. Well, kind of getting back to the kids then, how old are they, and kind of, where are they at now? And as far as the relationship that they've had with you, did you experience any sort of difficulties that they might have had, growing up with a father who was paralyzed? Did they have any outshone difficulties with that?
Well, I have a 19-year-old daughter named Bailey and a 17-year-old son named Cooper. The growing up, I think, from what I can tell, they're just used to the situation. It's, since I had kids after my injury, that's all they've ever known. To give you an example, I remember a story that Bailey told me once from middle school. She was making plans with a friend, and the friend said, well, I could have my dad drive us over to wherever they were going. And Bailey told me that she said, oh yeah, I forgot that fathers could drive. so I think it's just been so normal.
Yeah.
Because that's all they've ever known. When they were really little, they used to sit on my armrest and we'd use the computer together. They've helped me along the way as they've gotten older. They've helped me out with things that I need. So that's all they've ever known. I don't think that they really see much difference.
Yeah. As far as your perspective, then, how difficult has it been for you? How often do you think back, like, if I wasn't injured, this could have been a really different relationship? Or do you ever think about that?
Honestly, David, I really don't. I don't. From very early on in my injury, I knew that part of dealing with it was to not think about what could have been. That's just something I put out of my mind ever since the very beginning, and so I honestly have never really thought about I could do this or that. There's very specific situations that may have come up where, for example, my daughter would be playing the piano and I just off the cuff say to her, "Oh, it'd be fun if I could play the guitar like I used to with you."
Yeah.
But it's not something I ever dwelled on. And for the most part, I really don't spend any of my time thinking about what the other life might have been like.
Well, that's good. I think that's healthy. I know for me, that's probably where I would struggle. I feel like I would constantly be in that method of what coulda. So I was just interested in whether you had thought about that or not.
Yeah, it's never really been. So certainly that's been something that has helped me over the years where I don't think about that. But honestly, it's never really been that difficult for whatever reason. I just don't go there.
And I think that's perfectly fine. Actually, probably better, right? For everybody.
I think so too. I feel actually very lucky that I don't have a tendency to do that.
Well, good. Well, let's go ahead and change gears now. We've kind of, we've covered your injury and kind of personal life up to this point. And one of the things that is included in this whole journey has been the Morton Cure Paralysis Fund, or MCPF, as an acronym for Morton Cure Paralysis Fund. Can you, for anybody who doesn't know what the organization is about, or things like that, would you be willing to give kind of just a brief description of MCPF and what it is that we do?
Sure. So after my injury in 1995, the following summer, some high school buddies of mine, and in fact, one of them being the dad of a good friend of mine, got together and created a golf tournament in my small high school hometown of Wisconsin to raise money for me. And I said, I don't really need that, so I'd prefer if the money go to research. And so that started the Morton Cure Paralysis Fund. They had another one the next year in that same small hometown of mine. But then the third year, we moved it up to Minneapolis. I was starting to get stronger and a little more resilient by that time. And I knew that's where my connections in the business community could make a difference in our ability to raise funds. And many of my friends, including your dad, David, joined at that time to really make a difference and grow the organization. So that was now, I think we're just past 28 years ago, I believe, on that.
Yeah.
And so it's been, I think over that time, we've raised about $6.5 million.
Wow.
We've mostly been an all volunteer organization, and we've, through our venture capital strategy, we've turned that into another $20 million for spinal cord injury research all around the world.
Yeah.
So for a small organization, we've had a really large impact on research.
Totally. Well, and to the people who aren't, fully understanding of the whole venture capital strategy, your goal is really to kind of find initial research that's really groundbreaking, but doesn't have enough data to go and fetch big grants from government and other, societies that have large sums of money. And so your goal is to kind of help fund them at this base level so that they can get enough data and research and information so that they can go fetch those bigger dollars. Mm-hmm. And so when you say turning $6.5 million into, that much larger sum, that's really kind of the target of that, right?
That's exactly right. Myself and most of my friends, including your dad, cut our teeth in the financial industry. Mm-hmm. And so the concept behind things like venture capital funding and so forth was second nature to most of us. And I think that's helped us a lot. You've described that very well, David, and that's been something that's worked very well for us over the years and allowed us to have a much bigger impact than we might have otherwise.
Awesome. So what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced over the years then? Being that MCPF has been around for 28 years, lots of ebbs and flows, I'm sure. But is there any main challenges that you can think of that have been really difficult to kind of overcome?
A couple things on that. One of those is we just like every other kind of business, nonprofits have to react to and adapt to their environment. As we approached our 25th anniversary golf tournament in 2021, we decided to sunset that tournament, and that was hard because it was such a part of who we were. But what we were doing was adapting to the changing environment that we found ourselves in, which was most of the money we would make in that tournament that we could apply to research was made through corporations. And over probably the last 5 to 10 years, corporations have been tightening up their policies, pulling back the amount of their giving and directing their giving only to certain causes, usually causes which are very local and immediate in nature. So things like the food shelves and those sorts of, we could have an impact today.
Right.
Kind of missions. And so as we saw that happening, it takes a tremendous amount of organizational resources, to put on those kind of events.
Right.
And we decided that that was no longer the best way for us, or the best method for us to raise money and expend the resources that we had to do that.
Right.
So that was difficult. I would also say use the word challenges, I'll change it to goals. One of the goals that all nonprofits should have is how they maximize donor dollars.
Right.
And that's something I've always been proud of because we work really hard on that. First of all, we do that by not spending any money unless we can see a direct connection to the mission. The second step of that is to have all of the project requests, the funding requests for research that we receive from scientists be reviewed by their peers, by experts in the field, to make sure, if we have 10, for example, if we have 10 projects that are requesting funding, we won't be able to support them all. So where will our funding have the biggest bang for the buck?
Right.
So our peer reviewers, who are experts in the field, give us grades on all those projects, and we only fund those that have the greatest potential. And then last of maximizing donor dollars is the venture capital strategy that we spoke of earlier, where we can multiply the donor dollars' impact on research. And so that's something I'm really proud of, that we've done really well, and we continue to focus on that all the time.
Awesome. Well, kind of one final question here for you, because we are kind of getting past our time. But when you look at spinal cord injury research as a whole, what challenges do you see facing, the entirety of the industry, and what are you most excited for?
What I'm most excited for is this is a pivotal time in spinal cord injury. When I was hurt, essentially you could refer to that as the dark ages of research. There had never been any hope for a cure for spinal cord injury. And so back at that time, very few scientists were involved in it. Those that were referred to as sort of the Don Quixotes of the scientific world. You're tilting windmills, and this is something that'll never happen. Now, a quarter of a century later, it's night and day different. Pretty much all the scientists believe that a cure is inevitable. The science has moved so much during that time that it's just a matter of time and money until a cure is found. And we are already seeing therapies that are helpful to people. There was a huge one announced this year in May that we helped get started. And the person was called the Brain-Spine Interface through an organization in Switzerland that we helped fund. And on the very first day they turned on the system, the individual stood up and walked.
Wow.
It was just incredible.
Yeah.
So
and that's actually that's an episode of Spinal Cast. We interviewed the two doctors from that project.
Mm-hmm.
So for anybody watching or listening, make sure that you check out the Dr. Cortine and Dr. Block episode. That is what we are referring to. Really, really cool progression in the SCI research. Yeah,
it's really an exciting thing, and it shows the impact that we could have. But we continue to push the research forward. The nice part is there's scientists all over the world that are working on this now because the potential is so great. The second half of your question was the challenges.
Yeah.
The challenge is always to make it move faster.
Mm-hmm.
So we are constantly trying to push research as fast as we can. We constantly have to remind people that this is not an academic exercise, that there are people out there that are waiting for the help that that the scientists are working on. So that's one of our biggest challenges, is to just keep pushing and keep accelerating the research as much as we can.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's about all I had on my plate as far as questions to ask you. And it actually looks like we're pretty much right on time. If there's anything else you'd like to mention, I'll give you the floor. Otherwise, we might as well close things out.
Sure. Thanks for that opportunity. There's a couple things. First of all, as you said, there's a dark picture at the beginning of an injury like this. And for those that are going through it now, I want you to know that there are people like myself that have been down that road, and I know how hard it is, but I also know that there is hope and there is happiness.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of, or on the journey, I should say. So I'd encourage people that are just starting on that journey, keep fighting, keep pushing forward, even if it's, taking it one day at a time or even 1 hour at a time. Keep going, because there is happiness in your future, even though it might be hard to imagine that right now. The other thing I'd like to add is that for those that maybe are not familiar with MCPF and, find this to be a compelling cause that you want to get involved in, mm-hmm. Please join us. Either donate online or donate some of your time. As I mentioned, we are an all-volunteer organization right now, so either of those help a lot. And then finally, I just want to give essentially a shout out to all those that have been with MCPF for so many years, supporting us with your time and resources, of which, of course, David, you are one of those. Just a big shout out and thank you to all those people that have supported the MCPF along the way. You are making a big difference, and this thing is going to be solved with your help. So thank you very much.
That was great. And I think you bring up a great point that there's just so much progress being made right now. It is an incredible cause to support. So I urge everybody who is listening, watching, overhearing from another room, just check out mcpf.org. You'll be amazed with just the progress that's been made in the field of SCI research. And it's an awesome organization. Like I said, I've been involved since my childhood, and I continue to be proud to support it to this day and partake in Spinal Cast. So yeah, that's great. Well, one little final sign off here. Anybody who's listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, please, think about giving us a like or a follow. It does help us grow our followership. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube, maybe hit the subscribe button, thumbs up icon, bell icon. That way you get notified when new episodes drop. But long story short, we are just thankful for everybody who supports MCPF's vision and mission. And Peter, thank you again for joining us on today's episode.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.